Then we'll have a round of questions and comments. And of course, you may use chat for these questions and comments, and also raise your hand if you like to intervene. Again, it's been said, but still, may I ask you to keep your mics off if you are not speaking, and same time, we would highly appreciate if you could turn on your cameras and we can see your friendly and intelligent faces. Yeah, by mere coincidence, I'll be the first speaker, and the organizers have assured me that there is no conflict of interest on my side. I don't mind. And this is a joint paper of me and Yana Roshchina, who is also here. And this is a study trying to test a theory of collectivity of drinking cultures, which is one of the most famous theories in all alcohol studies. This theory was proposed by a Norwegian, Ole Jørgen Skog, 35 years ago. The background, in our previous studies, we showed a decline in alcohol consumption in Russia, both in terms of prevalence of alcohol use and alcohol, which is particularly important for younger cohorts. And of course, this evidence was supported by official statistics and backed by new restrictive alcohol policy, as well as economic crises. However, we need to know whether this decline is consistent among different drinking groups, light, moderate, and heavy. So it might happen that the overall consumption is declining. At the same time, most risky groups, heavy drinkers, remain the same or even increase their drinking. And in this sense, if it happens, actually the whole effects of decline would be much lower. We applied a theory of collectivity of drinking cultures, I mentioned before. It states that changes in the overall per capita consumption of alcohol is typically accompanied by parallel proportional changes in drinking habits at all levels of consumption, light, moderate, and heavy. Though the proportions of change, so they move in concert, upward or downward, though the proportions of change might be different among these groups. Of course, this influential theory was debated, extensively debated over years, and its empirical testability and its methodology have been questioned many times. And we must say that empirical findings were quite divergent for different countries. Some authors produced an evidence in favor of collectivity. The others, the evidence in favor of polarization, implying that drinking groups move ways and not in concert. And the third authors say that produced a mixture of both. We used theory of collectivity of drinking cultures, dividing this category into hard and soft collectivity. And hard collectivity means that trends across all percentile groups of the consumption distribution are in the same direction and equivalent in magnitude. Whereas soft collectivity means that all groups move in the same directions, upward or downward, but proportions are different among heavy and lighter drinkers. Our research motivation is clear, and this is actually the first attempt to apply this collectivity polarization conceptual framework for the case of Russia. And we are testing hypotheses of soft and hard collectivity. And also a third proposition, we would like to know to which extent the increasing abstinence rates affect this alcohol consumption decline, and to which extent it is explained by the increase in abstinence rates. Yeah, we are using data, 13 rounds collected between 2006 and 2018, and no sense to say more about data source in front of this audience. Measures. Our major dependent variable is individual volume of alcohol consumption during the last 30 days. And we divided all respondents into 5 unequal interpercentile groups. According to the personal intake, we have heavy drinkers, you see it on this slide, near heavy drinkers, moderate drinkers, light drinkers, and so-called non-drinkers, including abstainers, and those who did not drink during the last 30 days, but still used to drink from time to time. We have 2006 as a reference year in many controls, including age squared, education, logarithm of per capita income adjusted to regional consumer price index, body weight, marital status, structure of household, including number of adults, ethnicity, and regional climate measured by an average temperature in January. Can you hear me now? Some evidence that my... Can you hear me?
Sometimes we can't hear you.
Yeah, I see that it's inconsistent on stage.
You can turn off your video and it will be better maybe, if you don't mind.
No, it's okay now, I believe. Okay.
It's much better.
Yeah. Please show me if it's not okay. Okay, analysis. We have descriptive statistics, but after that, we estimated a generalized linear regression model with gamma distribution and long link for very skewed data, because the data is actually very skewed. And also we decided after some hesitations to include abstainers in analysis, and we added 100 to every respondent's measure of alcohol before log transfer. And of course, all models were run separate for each gender. And we included interaction between consumption level and year in the regression model, and the use of wild test to estimate significance of main groups of variables, including period dummy variable, consumption level dummy variable, and this consumption level and year interaction. And finally, likelihood ratio test was performed to assess the goodness of fit of models with and without interactions. This is about descriptive statistics, and you may see the decline in alcohol consumption, both in terms of prevalence and per capita alcohol consumption. And here are some figures, major figures about that. We see, for example, that abstinence rates increased very intensively from 22 to 37% of a period of observation, particularly among women and younger cohorts. As for the volume of alcohol consumption, we have a very significant decrease, 38% for all the respondents. It's less, 24% when excluding abstainers. It's much smaller for current drinkers, drink during the last 30 days. And we could, here we see that the overall decline might be largely explained by the increase in abstention rates. Our main result is that the trends across all percentile group move in concert for both genders, confirming the theory of collectivity of drinking cultures here. At the same time, relative decrease in alcohol volume consumption was the lowest among heavy drinkers and the highest among near abstainers, which does not contradict this theory. Decrease was greatest, on the contrary, among heavy drinkers and lowest among near abstainers. All figures here, I will not take you time on that. You can see afterwards if you like. The next point is about impact of different percentile group to the overall volume of alcohol consumption and its changes. And here we see that the more groups drink, the more their contribution to the overall volume of alcohol consumption, meaning that the heaviest drinkers, their impact is increasing over time. And more specifically, the largest decline is relative contribution was among abstainers, and the greatest increase was among heavy drinkers. And what is important, separate and very important result, that increase of abstention rates over time contribute to more than 3/4 of the overall decline, 78%, while the decrease in average volume of alcohol consumption made only 22%, less than 1/4. Here all figures illustrating these results, these conclusions. And here is you then you see the results of regression modeling, which actually fit quite well with descriptive statistics. And we see that WAL tests show that coefficients for periods and consumption level, also with their interactions, were significant for both genders. We see that a likelihood ratio test showed that modeled interactions provided better predictions for dependent variable, and finally that all groups decreased their consumption almost similarly before 2010, with some exceptions, and then interactions became significant in different groups. A few words about control, impact of control variables on the volume of alcohol consumption. We have a parabolic dependence on age, meaning that an increase in the middle age cohorts and decline in older cohorts. We have positive effects of educational attainment, per capita income, marital status, urban residents, and northern regions. We have at the same time negative effects of the number of adults and number of kids in the households, and of course Muslim groups drink much less than the others. And the effect of body weight is non-significant. Sensitivity, yes, we provided some sensitivity analysis. First, we excluded abstainers and ran the same regression models for that. Then second, we used a different type of regression, which is quantile regression, following some previous studies of that kind, and also calculated for both genders and for all respondents. In all three cases, we obtained the same similar results. Conclusions. So first conclusion is that we have downward trends in alcohol consumption, and all investigated percentile groups, light, moderate, and heavy, all 5 of them move in the same direction. And obviously a collectivity hypothesis rather than polarization hypothesis for the case of Russia. And reductions were similar before the year of 2010, but different afterwards. However, this collectivity, evidence for collectivity is still there in spite of all external and internal effects. And very important, more than 3/4 of the overall decline resulted from the large increase in abstention rates. And this is one of the peculiarities of Russia, by the way. Then proportional declines were largest in percentiles with low consumption, and absolute declines were largest about heavier drinkers on the contrary. And as a result of it, a relative impact on the aggregate volume of consumption decreased for light drinkers and increased for most risky heavier drinkers. And overall, our results, obtained results, support soft collectivity hypothesis rather than hard collectivity hypothesis.
We can't hear.
Звук пропал.
It has policy implications. If you actually obtain result support in terms of policy, a total, so-called total consumption model, meaning that measures, restrictive measures, must be focused upon the general population rather than simply on most risky heavier drinkers. And it opposes to so-called alcoholism model, focusing on division between heavier drinkers and the rest of the population, and inviting to focus on most risky groups. Although, of course, we should pay a lot of attention to most risky heavier drinkers, no other way. And it implies, second, that existing policy restrictions, I mean, in Russia, decreasing availability and affordability of alcohol, they actually did distribution rather in concert, rather than producing polarization among drinking groups, and it's okay. It's also consistent with the proposed theory. The final point, we are pleased to inform you that this paper was successfully published recently in Drug and Alcohol Review, which is a good reputable journal, and you may see the full text there and this is a reference. Thank you for your kind attention. Well, now it's a bit awkward. I'm in a bit an awkward position. I have to respond and to regulate this debate, but anyway, let's try. And Yana will help me when we go on. Yana, could you respond to the issue? Why do we use body weight, but not body mass index? Почему не массу тела используем, да, вес?
Да, прошу прощения.
You provided an answer actually, but please.
Я прошу прощения, я буду на русском, потому что иначе будет очень сложно. Да, я увидела вопрос, почему мы использовали вес, ну или массу тела, а не индекс массы тела. На самом деле это очень просто. Если человек потребляет алкоголь, он должен знать, что на самом деле алкогольная интоксикация, она зависит не только от количества выпитого, но и от массы, не от индекса массы тела, потому что если человек, например, маленького роста и у него достаточно большой, может быть, индекс массы тела, но сама масса не очень большая, тогда вот эти выпитые граммы алкоголя, они распределяются на не очень большую массу, если это женщина, скажем, достаточно полная. Другое дело, что если мы имеем человека, может быть, даже не с таким большим индексом массы тела, но с большой массой, скажем, из большого роста, если высокий человек, то у него может быть большая масса, и хотя индекс массы тела не будет таким большим, но его масса будет больше, чем вот у маленькой полненькой женщины. И алкоголь, как известно, распределяется именно в зависимости от массы тела. Поэтому человек, у которого больше масса, он при прочих равных условиях может просто больше выпить. То, что убьет человека с небольшой массой, может быть нормально для человека с большой массой тела. Да, я ответила. Vadim?
We have another question in the chat.
Вадим Валерьевич, вы слышите нас?
No.
У меня было выпадение. Коллеги, я подсоединюсь, соответственно. Ну, Полина Михайловна, если опять вылечу, вы тогда берите бразды.
Ну,
Please run this well.
Окей. Там есть вопрос от Валерии Кондратенко в чате. Вы посмотрите? Can we assume the same tendency of theory of collectivity, but for other addictive goods?
Well, the point is that I do not have this question in chat. I do not know why and how.
So the question is, can we assume the same tendency of theory of collectivity, but for other addictive goods, for example, for the consumption of cigarettes? Or is this theory only relevant for alcohol?
Please say it again. I turn off my video to hear you better.
Can we assume the same tendency of theory of collectivity, but for other addictive goods? For example,
yes,
for the consumption of cigarettes. Or
actually,
is this theory only relevant for alcohol?
This theory was proposed by Ole Jorgenskog in 1985, and it was proposed for alcohol consumption. He did not make any obvious proposition for smoking and drugs, and actually I did not come across the studies. Yes, I did come across the studies saying. You remind me of the case of Australia, in which it was checked up. They did not use the theory of collectivity in an explicit way, but still they produced the results showing that actually all groups regarding alcohol, smoking, and drugs are moving in the same direction. However, regarding the theory itself, it was all about alcohol. Yes, I got messages in chat now. There was some.
Great.
Да, если позволите, я чуть-чуть дополню. На самом деле, вот это вопрос задала Валерия Кондратенко. Это теоретический вопрос, но практически во время для какого-то курса, на самом деле, мы попробовали посчитать вот ровно такую же модель, или, по крайней мере, очень похожую для сигарет. Я не помню, какие получились результаты, но там были некоторые сложности с тем, чтобы выделить вот процентные группы, поскольку здесь мы работали с процентными группами, и вот в алкоголе, ну, как бы количество потребляемого алкоголя, оно более плавно, что ли, изменяется, и довольно легко выделить 5%, следующие 5%, 10% и так далее. Для России вот получилась такая особенность, что сейчас у нас вот по данным РЛМС очень много непьющих, поэтому малопьющие или почти не пьющие группы у нас и так получились очень большие. Если вы обратили внимание, это 60% для мужчин и 70% для женщин, потому что в последние годы там больше 60% женщин не пьет. И мы не можем для них посчитать, или не пьет, по крайней мере, в течение 30 дней, мы для них не можем посчитать объем. То есть он равен нулю, мы их не можем различить между собой. А для сигарет там действительно получилось не очень удобно, потому что там люди, видимо, курят пачками, да, одна пачка, две пачки, и поэтому получается очень такая кратность вот этим 20 сигаретам, и технически там была, в общем, некоторая сложность. Но, в принципе, вот такие предварительные расчеты для, по крайней мере, для какого-то курса Валерия делала, так что, может быть, и можно как-то подумать, как это сделать, и посмотреть для сигарет. Да, спасибо.
Yeah, actually, I believe it might be tested actually for both cigarettes and for drugs if you have some data available. By the way, another comment. Now we have proved, as we believe, that this collective theory of collectivity of drinking culture is working for the case of Russia. So all drinking groups are moving more or less in concert, upward or downward. They were moving downward. Now it's a kind of stabilization, and probably they will move upward in near future. But we are now discussing with Yana the next step which is to check if the changes in alcohol consumption, that is decline in alcohol consumption, is consistent with the changes in alcohol-related harm, meaning the social problems related to alcohol and some others. And there is some literature regarding this consistency or inconsistency, collectivity or polarization. So there is a mix. Again, the empirical evidence is pretty divergent here. Okay, can I ask if we have any other interventions, questions, or comments?
Seems like no.
Yeah, I do not see anything in our chat, and I do not see any raised hands by the moment. So if not, then we thank you so much for your attention, and we move to our second paper, and it is presented by Ksenia Rozhkova, Sergey Roshchin, and again Yana Roshchina, who is on the scene every day and yesterday, if as far as I know. It's do non-cognitive skills matter for alcohol consumption, evidence from Russia, and I guess Ksenia Rozhkova will present this paper, if I'm correct.
Thank you. I'm just sharing my screen.
Yeah, Ksenia, you're welcome.
Can I see the presentation?
Yeah, we see.
So thank you, dear colleagues. I'm very pleased to be here today and to present this paper, which is dedicated to the complicated relationship between non-cognitive skills and alcohol consumption. And what makes this topic so special is the fact that it involves knowledge and instruments from various disciplines, mainly from economics and psychology. So basically, there are two very wide strands of literature available. One strand of literature is in economics and sociology, and the other strand of literature is in psychology. And usually, when researchers are talking about what determines alcohol consumption in economics or in sociology, they focus on some social, demographic, sometimes economic factors, and they especially stress education as an important predictor of alcohol consumption. Which has a higher educational level is negatively correlated with alcohol consumption. So the main conclusion, which is usually driven from this literature, is that by investing more in education, we will potentially have less problems associated with risky behaviors, with alcohol consumption and other sort of addictions. But on the other hand, psychologists, they focus on personality and without taking into consideration other social characteristics. And they look at how personality is related to alcohol abuse and alcohol consumption. And this simple causal relationship between education and alcohol consumption becomes way more complicated if we start to analyze the whole picture and introduce non-cognitive skills into this analysis. And what do I mean by non-cognitive skills? The very name of this term suggests that these are just some skills and abilities which are not cognitive, right? And cognitive abilities are some intelligence and intelligence-related skills. The simplest examples are ability to read, to write, to learn foreign languages. They are measured by achievement and IQ tests. At the same time, non-cognitive skills represent a broad but stable across social contexts way of thinking and behaving, which turned out to be very important for pretty much all social and economic outcomes, starting from unemployment, wages, investment in education and health, and then finishing with participation in criminal activity. So these non-cognitive skills around 15 years ago became a very prominent topic in economic research. So, but what is great about non-cognitive skills in comparison to intelligence is that they are malleable in teenage years, and some part of the skills is genetically inherited from parents, but a major part of these skills is formed during early stages of socialization by social environment, by school, and by parental involvement. So since they are formed by social environment, they can serve as a mediator between parental alcohol abuse and child alcohol abuse late in life. But since they remain responsive to external policies to some extent, it means that we can break this negative inheritance mechanism. And also Russia is a very special and relevant setting for such research due to high levels of alcohol consumption. So the most widely used psychological concept, which is used to address non-cognitive skills, is the Big Five. This concept suggests that any personality of any individual can be described from the perspective of five wide categories. These are conscientiousness, which implies hard work, work ethics, discipline, etc. Then there is openness to experience, which sometimes is referred to as a measure of intelligence and internal curiosity. Then there is extroversion, which means sociability. There is neuroticism, which means emotional instability. And finally, the fifth category is agreeableness, which implies friendliness, kindness, and characteristics like that. And the Big Five became very popular not only in psychology, but also in economics due to its major advantage, its relative stability. It is proved by empirical researchers in psychology and in economics that these Big Five traits are consistent and stable throughout one's working life, approximately from 20 years to 60 years. And that means that we can explain some social events, for example, alcohol consumption, with the influence of these non-cognitive skills and not vice versa. So here on the slide, you can see a bit in more detail which facets are included in each of the five categories. I should say that this evidence is mostly collected from psychological literature, which is based on small samples usually, and use correlates as the main instrument. So we see here that conscientiousness is associated with is negatively associated with alcohol consumption because it has large positive effect on health, then we see that extroversion and neuroticism are positively related to alcohol consumption. And for the rest of the big 5 categories, the evidence is inconclusive. So for our empirical investigation, we decided to check how alcohol consumption is related to non-cognitive skills, with a special attention to education in Russian setting. So we use RLMS-HSE data for years from 2016 to 2018. We observe both males and females in our sample aged from 20 to 60, and the estimates, these non-cognitive estimates are provided by a special survey module, which consists of 24 questions dedicated to individual behavior. So these questions represent each one facet of personality. And these questions imply an answer on a scale from 1 to 4. For example, the respondents are asked how often they finish their tasks, or how often they enjoy beauty, and they say a number from 1 to 4 depending on the frequency. So these 24 questions can be mapped into big 5 categories. I can show the mapping afterwards. I have it in appendix. So the final estimate of each category is calculated as the standardized mean of the corresponding questions. The only problem is that the non-cognitive measures are only observed for each individual once in only in one wave. This block of questions was introduced in 2016, and the majority of respondents answered these questions in 2016. And based on the assumption of stability of these characteristics, we extrapolate our measures of non-cognitive skills to the remaining waves, and use panel estimates which help us to reliably show the effect on alcohol consumption. So now let's switch to the measures of alcohol consumption. There are 3 main measures: the probability of abstinence, then its current alcohol consumption, which is used for robustness checks and sensitivity checks of our results. And there is a measure, the volume of alcohol consumed, which is based on 3 consecutive questions. The first one is dedicated to beverages that are drunk by a person in 30 days, then to the amount and the frequency of consumption. And then we recalculate the overall volume in grams of pure ethanol consumed in a month. Our methodology is based on double hurdle model, which suggests that alcohol-related decisions have 2 stages. On the first stage, person decides whether to drink or not to drink, to be an abstainer or not. And we use random effects probit model, which allows us to account for the individual heterogeneity in alcohol consumption. So the second stage is the stage where only people who consume alcohol are observed. The dependent variable here is the natural logarithm of the volume of pure ethanol consumed in the last 30 days. But since we may not observe the consumers here who are not abstainers but did not consume alcohol in the last 30 days, our sample is censored. And in order to account for this censoring, we use Tobit model with random effects and with a Heckman correction for abstinence. And we run separate models for male and female subsamples. We have two large set of controls, which are quite traditional for economic and sociological strand of literature. The first group are social demographic features. They include gender, age, ethnicity, education, household per capita income, marital status, the composition of the household, the presence of children, the number of adults, religion, the type of settlement, and body weight. And the second group of characteristics are regional characteristics. Average regional air temperature in January to account for climate differences across regions. Then we have regional per capita income to represent economic situation in the region, and prices for beer and vodka. And also we control for the year of observation. Our work has several limitations. One of them is possible reverse causality, though I said that Big Five are quite stable. There is evidence, at least for late teenage years, that personality can change due to excessive alcohol consumption. But the Big Five appear to be less affected by such events. Then there are possible measurement errors, since RLMS is survey, and people usually do not like to say that they are lazy or that they consume too much alcohol. So there could be biases due to that. There is a limitation of time frame. And we also ignore possible models of drinking, which could also be relevant for personality. So from the descriptive statistics, we can already observe that some interesting results. For instance, abstainers tend to be lower in openness and extroversion, but higher in conscientiousness, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And I did not add a slide here, but in educational context, more educated people, meaning people with higher education and college degrees, on average have higher levels of conscientiousness and openness, but lower neuroticism. So let's turn to the results of the models. So for the probability of abstinence, we see that non-cognitive skills are indeed statistically significant. Conscientiousness shows a positive sign, just as expected, and extroversion shows a negative sign. So other Big Five traits are not significant, just as the level of education. And now let's turn to the results of the volume models, which are more interesting from my perspective. We also see a significant effect of conscientiousness, just as on the previous slide, and extroversion, but also neuroticism and openness turned out to be statistically significant for men and for women. But here I would like to draw your attention to the differences in the effect of education when Big Five are included or excluded from the analysis. So the first two columns represent the models where the Big Five are excluded, and columns 3 and 4 when they are included. So the effect of college degree and higher education dramatically drops once we introduce Big Five. And this drop is especially large for higher education and for college among men. And this means that part of the effect, which was previously attributed to education, was now taken away by non-cognitive skills. And we view this result as evidence that non-cognitive skills mediate the relationship between alcohol consumption and education.
Ksenia, I'm sorry for this intervention. Let me say that formally your time is up. Of course, we still have some time, given we have 3 papers, not 4, but how much time do you need to finish?
That's just the conclusion slide. I'll just say some.
Okay,
and that's it.
Please go on.
So as you saw, there is a strong persistent relationship between alcohol consumption and individual personality traits. These results are quite robust since we performed multiple econometric tests and changed econometric techniques and dependent variables. And the results in all the models showed persistent and similar results. And since the effect of a university degree and college diploma on the volume of alcohol consumption drastically differs with and without the inclusion of non-cognitive skills, we suppose that personality can serve as the intermediate point between education and alcohol-related behavior. And therefore, by avoiding personality traits, we overestimate this effect of education on alcohol consumption. It is important that these personality traits are formed mostly before formal, especially before higher education. And such traits as conscientiousness, extroversion, and neuroticism, which are highly related to alcohol consumption, as we could see before, they are already formed by the time a person enrolls in university or college. So further policy interventions among aiming to reduce risky behaviors, especially among students, should focus on the formation of non-cognitive skills related to conscientiousness during school as a part of early socialization. So the interventions in higher education aimed at building these skills are less effective, as literature suggests. So that's it. Thank you. I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Ksenia. Now we turn to questions and answers, and please respond to the question of Yana Katerla in chat.
Гипотеза о том, что сочетание определенных характеристик дает эффект на потребление алкоголя. No, actually, we did not check whether such interactions exist, mostly because the literature only focuses on the simultaneous inclusion of these 5 characteristics. But no, we did not check this hypothesis.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions, interventions? By the moment, I cannot see any messages in chat and no raised hands, but let me ask once again if you have any questions and comments. I guess no. Then thank you so much again, Ksenia, and dear colleagues, we are moving to the third and the last paper for this session. Let me give the floor to Dmitry Schapov from the St. Petersburg School of Economics and Management of the Higher School of Economics to present this paper on price effects on smoking behavior, the case of Russian anti-smoking legislation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, please go on.
Excellent. So, hello, my name is Dmitry Schapov. I'm a master's student at Higher School of Economics at St. Petersburg. And today we're doing some presentation on price elasticity of tobacco consumption in Russia, where I basically try to look if maybe anti-smoking policies that took place in Russia changed consumer behavior somehow, and how it applies to the whole story of affordability fluctuations. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for having me and also keeping up this conference through the years. Firstly, here are some very, very obvious bullet points here about how it's unhealthy to smoke, and smoking of different tobacco products is conventionally regarded as one of the most influential factors that are responsible for large proportions of premature deaths that are associated with chronic respiratory diseases and heart diseases. And here in Russia, for nearly 20 years, more than a half of working age population were reporting themselves as active smokers, according to RLMS-HSE data, and nearly the quarter of men that died at the time suffered from the diseases which are attributed to smoking of tobacco. And this, combined with quite high participation rates among male population and rising participation rates among women, it poses some serious threat, or better call it problem, from the perspective of public health. And well, Russian policymakers try to disincentivize the hazardous behavior of smoking, and there actually aren't many ways to do so. To disincentivize smoking, learning from policymakers from all over the world, we can say levy some taxes, set a minimum price floor, or make insurance a little bit pricey for smokers. These are the monetary measures, as we call them here, also in the bottom of the slide. So also there are non-monetary measures, like one can ban tobacco ads from TV channels, or make plane passengers refrain from smoking while flying. And this is sort of thing I will be talking about for the rest of the presentation, except you will not be hearing about the diseases no more. So here are the outline, nothing to look at here. And here's the plot with participation rates. I calculated the values using the data from RLMS-HSE panel, and these are numbers for working age population. The males are all from 16 to 59 years old, and females are all between 16 and 54. The leftmost point at the year of 2004 is right after the peak of participation that happened at the late 90s. It was the time when a large share of foreign direct investment came to Russia with the purpose to build some tobacco producing facilities, and it made Russia the largest producer of tobacco and of cigarettes in all Europe. And during the time tobacco producing corporations starting to promote cigarettes in all the forms of advertising possible on TV, press, as outdoor commercials. You could see them literally everywhere. And sometime after, cigarettes ads were banned, and it was just the beginning. In July 2013, the ambitious anti-smoking federal law partly entered into force, and it meant to introduce minimum retail price floor policy and increase excise tax in January 2014. And from June 2014, the law prohibits any form of tobacco advertisement, including direct promotions and sponsorships. Also, the list of completely smoke-free zones were expanded, and tobacco products were allowed to sell only by stores. And in January 2017, new measures to protect legitimate producers and sellers of tobacco from black market contraband were presented. It was the new system of tobacco, EGAIS, as it's called in Russia. It's a unified state automated information system launched in July 2018. It's basically used by Russian tax authorities to track the price and time each individual pack of cigarettes, where it's sold, when it's sold. So, and given the setting, we would like to see how Russian consumers have been changing their smoking behavior, and whether it's true that some age groups are more responsive to policy shocks, and whether poorer people are a little more prone to smoking cessation, and the motivation behind it. It's well, it's quite easy to understand. Now to the literature from the field. So most of the research coming from United States and other high-income countries reports the researchers report aggregated elasticity somewhere between -0.2 and -0.6. It's when aggregated across people of all ages and income levels. Look at the values in the parentheses here. These numbers are elasticities from papers. Lower to middle income countries are, however, a bit different. Most of the world's tobacco are grown in China, India, and Brazil, and even with lower income levels, it's cheaper to smoke there. And what makes it even more difficult to evaluate is that people there, in case of, say, if cigarettes become more expensive, people may not only switch to some lower quality ones, like with no filter or just cheaper ones, they can start growing their own tobacco there, tobacco leaf. And this is not taking into account the quality of data and the fact that although most of the lower income countries have some sort of their own anti-smoking legislation, right? But they may be struggling to enforce it effectively for obvious reasons. And in these terms, Russia is quite easy to understand because people here rarely smoke something other than cigarettes and don't cultivate their own tobacco. And most of the existing research on Russia in the field are estimates using pooled RLMS-HSE data from before the legislation, and the papers report different estimates for males and females. They report different behaviors of male smokers and female smokers in Russia here, and we're going to contribute to the literature somewhere here by drawing on these papers from pre-legislation era. So now we proceed to assumptions. We expect our consumers to smoke less when they face rising tobacco prices, at least a little like in the papers. We also expect the new non-monetary measures like bans of smoking in public places or bans of advertisement to place some sort of extra barrier, contributing to consumer costs and shifting them to somewhere right in the plot here. So now to our data. I suppose here we rely on RLMS-HSE years 2004 to 2018 specifically. Such selection of years is determined mainly by two factors. The first one is the availability of information on regional tobacco prices by Russian Statistical Agency, and another reason is the economic crisis of 1998 with the ruble denomination and all the problems arising from it. So here we also get information on individual smoking behavior from adult questionnaire, whether a person smokes or not, and how many individual cigarettes they smoke daily. We also, of course, look at the levels of income, right? And apart from basic socioeconomic characteristics for each person, we record number of adult family members of 18 years and older who report themselves as active smokers at the time. We need this to account for some possible in-household peer effects. But now, what's important is that data on price of cigarettes is rather diverse. We can proxy tobacco prices that individuals presumably observe through data from Russian Statistical Agency of Rosstat or extract them from RLMS-HSE community observation data. All the measures are problematic in some way or another, and from now on I will only report the results obtained using the price from Rosstat on regional price for a pack of filtered cigarettes of a foreign brand that is reported on a monthly basis. And here are descriptives for these variables. Here are some descriptives for observations from 2004 to 2018, broken down into never smokers and ever smokers. These tables for male represent respondents only of a working age. as I mentioned. And we can see that male smokers are more likely to be poor and less educated than their never smoking counterparts. Note that this third row in the table with family members who smoke except the respondent. Large values on the right indicates the possible presence of in-household peer effects. And this is another table for females, and the situation here is a bit different. Here's this, the situation regarding the income is different. Women who smoke are more likely to be wealthier than their never smoking counterparts. Also, the occupation effect, as we may call it, works only for the top tier specializations, unlike for males who tend to smoke less in middle level occupations. But these numbers may be difficult to compare as the distributions of job roles are different among males and females. And finally, now we're about to talk about our model. We use a two-part model where the expected number of cigarettes smoked daily for an individual is modeled as a result of probability that this very individual smokes multiplied by the expected smoking intensity, conditional on that if they would smoke. The participation is modeled using logistic regression, and the consumption intensity is modeled using just a simple linear regression. And because the dependent variables from the two models they come additively in low likelihood, they can be estimated separately, and the resulting total elasticity would be just the sum of calculated price elasticities from the two equations. And here's the model. Here is the more detailed specification for each equation. For each part, we use the same set of covariates, and please note that we estimate different set of betas, not only for males and females, but for each of available years of data. And here are the calculated predicted elasticities for each of the years, for both females and males. Look at how they're different, and not only in their magnitude, but in their overall significance that come from the significance of individual coefficients, betas from respective equations. And it is better to plot the numbers with the confidence intervals, and it looks better. Here are the same total elasticities, again, which come participation and consumption elasticities. Now, look how the plot dives deep for females equations right after the year of legislation in 2013, but seemingly it returns back after a few years. If we break these total elasticities and look at the terms, first, here's the consumption intensity. Look how confidence intervals overlap during the time period for population of different sexes. And another plot here is with the elasticities coming from the participation equation only. The figure resembles the total elasticity, and it's just like the carbon copy of the, so our total elasticity is just like a carbon copy of the participation, of the elasticity coming from participation equation. And to sum up, well, we see that right after the year of legislation, there's some kind of shock of in the estimated elasticities, and we also, how much time do I have? I'm sorry.
You still have a couple of minutes.
Okay, so we also tried to incorporate in the model the different interactions of different set of variables with price to estimate that maybe the elasticities are heterogeneous in terms of geography, or maybe for people of different ages, or for people coming from families with different incomes. And there's basically no difference in elasticities for people with different education background, for people coming from different regions. And only thing that we observe is that people who are coming from rural areas or smaller cities, not regional capitals, they show elasticities of larger magnitudes. But that's all regarding the heterogeneity of the effect. And now we just suppose that the legislation, which is of course affected different regions differently, it played its role just as a temporal smoking participation deterrent, and we have reasons to expect that people just will be smoking at the levels they smoked before, and that's all. Thank you for attending my presentation, and I'm ready to ask your questions.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. Then please stop your presentation to see the audience. Okay, great. And dear colleagues, this is time for your questions and comments. Yes, Judith, please, you're welcome.
I have a simple question out of ignorance. What is the state of legality of tobacco substitutes, nicotine, in Russia? I have tried to read what's on the internet and I'm not clear on that. And we're having a big controversy over it in Britain, for example, in the United States, a moral panic. So I was very interested to know what discussion is going on now in Russia about that, and what, for all of you experts actually for this discussion, alcohol and tobacco, what do you forecast is going to be the outcome after we've had the next RLMS? Where are we going in the pandemic? First, I'd like to know what has happened with nicotine substitutes right now.
Thank you for the question. So by, you mean mostly electronic cigarettes, right? What's called?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
So they are legal in Russia. They are sold and they are taxed as any other tobacco, as cigarettes, as roll your own tobacco. But unfortunately, given our micro data, mostly the RLMS-HSE, the consumption of this alternative smoking electronic cigarettes, we do not observe it, as we observe the tobacco cigarettes in our data.
Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions and comments? Up to now, I cannot see anyone. Yeah, Polina Mikhailova, it's much harder to run this conference online, you see.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Guys, I'm much less active if compared to the offline conferences.
I agree, but probably the topic also is very, very, narrow. I mean, there are not so many experts in your field.
Well, there are not many experts in any field, actually.
No, when it comes to labor market, there are more experts.
Well, yeah, okay, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, we are coming to an end of this session, but before that, let me make very short comments on this alcohol consumption and smoking behavior. I have a feeling that we might be on the eve, at the beginning of new potential trends. If we observe the alcohol consumption here in Russia, might be not only. Because obtained data show some increase in alcohol consumption in most recent years after the long-term and consistent decline. We do not know yet, and we'll wait and see if it's just a current fluctuation or a real new trend, upward trend. But there is a possibility that we have reached the bottom and then we moved into the opposite direction. As far as the alcohol-related harm is concerned, we searched for a variety of official statistics. I must say to you, without getting into detail, that this evidence is quite controversial, meaning that some indicators, some statistical indicators are going upward and the others going downward. So it's not very simple at all. It's different, I guess. We do not have such evidence for smoking. Here we have much more consistent decline, particularly among males for the last period, in fact, for many years. And it results, to my mind, not only from the numerous policy restrictions which were produced and showed by Dmitry in his paper, but most of all largely from very heavy taxation policy. I mean the excise tax policy first of all, and the point is, well, we have an annual significant increase in excise tax rates here in Russia, and the point is that the alcohol producers have managed to freeze the increase of excise tax rates during the last years, since the mid 2010s, and the tobacco producers failed to do that. So they have both numerous restrictions as an alcohol area, but also a very heavy increase in taxation, followed immediately by the increase in retail prices, of course. And this is a very important reason for this smoking to come down, though not only, obviously. And at the same time, it produced a new phenomenon in the market for cigarettes. And this new phenomenon is sharply increasing illegal turnover cigarettes in Russia, which is a novelty, because about 5 years ago, it was not the case. It was, well, close to zero. Now they have quite significant numbers. And we have everything. I mean, just tax avoidance, tax evasion. We have gray import from Belarus, first of all, and other countries of custom union. We have a lot of counterfeit products. And they are pretty concerned. I mean, the major brands, major three, they're very much concerned with this increase. Anyway, we expect very intensive changes in these markets in the near future, and it would be very much interesting to follow it. That was some kind of conclusive remark for this session. Let me thank you all for participation, the speakers, the audience, and of course, let me express my gratitude to the organizers again of this conference. Thank you so much. Polina Mikhailova, would you like to say something? I mean, to wrap it up, or probably you have some important statements, announcements, or whatever.
No, thank you. I think that we still have one session which is going on still, and we have 2 more sessions which will start at 3 p.m. So everybody is invited to join. Thank you very much for participating.